Been a long time, Snake.
Are you talking to me?
That's no way to greet an old war buddy, Snake.
I think you might have the wrong guy. I'm Sarah Palin, former governor of Alaska.
It all went down 5 hours ago. Heavily armed soldiers occupied Shadow Moses Island, led by members of Unit Foxhound.
Dude, I don't know you people.
They presented Washington with a single demand, and they say that if it isn't met, they'll launch a nuclear weapon. You're to investigate whether or not the terrorists have the ability to launch a nuclear strike, and stop them if they do.
I don't know. This sounds way out of my league.
You'd better use your night vision goggles.
Be careful. There are always a lot of soldiers guarding the communication tower.
Be careful. You're just recovering from a cold.
Be careful. Wolves have the advantage in the dark. Not only can they see better, but they have a keen sense of smell as well.
Wait, there's wolves now? Metal Gear Solid was unlike anything that had come before it. Most people just thought of video games as that thing that kids play and it teaches them hand-eye coordination and gets them to shut up for a minute so you could have your morning scotch in peace. Nobody really considered video games as a viable medium for telling engaging stories. And rightly so. I mean, up till that point, the vast majority of games were like, collect this star, jump over this crevasse, collect this star while jumping over this crevasse, shoot at enemy ships from inside this crevasse. Uh-oh, E.T. is stuck at the bottom of this crevasse. Then one day, series creator Hideo Kojima thought, what if I made Escape from New York a video game? But also, I'm gonna add some sex appeal. Look at those polygonal thighs, boys. We've done it. We've done it. The game made quite a splash in video game culture at the time, with critics giving it largely favorable reviews. It led to tons of sequels, comics, radio dramas, and supposedly an upcoming film starring Oscar Isaac, but I wouldn't hold my breath for that one. It also spawned dozens of memes over the years, mostly related to cardboard boxes and cardboard box adjacent humor. Hideo Kojima wasn't a scrub when he started this project. He'd already made Policenauts, a text-based sci-fi game for the PS1, and of course, the previous two Metal Gear games. Metal Gear Solid would combine his tactical espionage action with a dialogue-heavy story. For this to work, he needed a talented crew of voice actors, namely one David Hayter, famous for writing the first two X-Men movies, and for appearing in an episode of the 90s sitcom Major Dad.
Give me some skin, homie.
A show that also starred...
They played us like a damn fiddle!
Also, I guess to some extent, he was hired for being a talented voice actor.
Colonel, I'm trying to sneak around, but I'm dummy thick, and the clap of my ass cheeks keeps alerting the guards.
I mentioned Kojima working on Metal Gear 1 and 2, and if you're not familiar with those games, let's take a step back.
Kept you waiting, huh?
The storyline of the first Metal Gear is pretty simple. Outer Heaven is a fortress created by a rogue militia group, and Solid Snake, an agent of the US military special forces, Foxhound, has to infiltrate it and stop Metal Gear, a giant walking tank that can launch a nuclear weapon from anywhere on the planet. This general premise will basically carry over to every subsequent game in the series. The first game also introduces a lot of elements that are developed and fleshed out better in later games, such as calling your support team via codec, looking for specific items to help you overcome obstacles, and bosses with some sort of theme. In this game, it's stuff like Bloody Brad, or Twin Shot, or my favorite, Dirty Duck. Yeah, you're a dirty, dirty duck, aren't you? Unfortunately, there's also a lot of cheap death bullshit in the first game that hasn't aged well and could probably be chalked up to how old the game is. And by bullshit, I mean like walking into a room and promptly dying because it's filled with invisible gas. If you call your support team, they'll say, "Did I forget to mention you need a gas mask for this room? Whoops." First of all, why is there even a gas room? Like, who's hanging out in the gas room? So, this is a great 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, walkable neighborhoods, new paint, a gas room, 2-car garage. Wait, what was that last one? It's got a big 2-car garage. No, what's a gas room? Well, it's a room full of poisonous gas. It was popular in the 60s, but fell out of style after, well, All the deaths. What would we even use a room like that for? What kind of real estate agent are you anyways? You know, there's asbestos in the ceilings too. I didn't hear you complaining about that. Also, sometimes the floor will just open up underneath your feet with no warning, and Snake will fall into the pits of hell. So, stuff like that is pretty annoying and prevents the game from being truly great. There's also very little instruction on what you're supposed to do next. At one point, Snake is captured in a jail cell, and there's no hint whatsoever how to get out. Even using C4 on the walls didn't work. The solution? Obviously, it's to punch through the walls with your bare fists. Like, fuck dude, if you could just Kool-Aid Man through the walls, why am I even bothering with these key cards?
Oh yeah!
Anyways, near the end of the game, Big Boss gives you progressively sketchier instructions, like, hey, go into this room and die in this hole. Trust me bro, I'm a general or something. We eventually find out that Big Boss is in fact the leader of Outer Heaven and was playing both sides, deliberately trying to sabotage you so that he could keep his control over Foxhound and Outer Heaven at the same time. Talk about trying to have your cake and fuck it over too. So Snake defeats Metal Gear, then Big Boss, then destroys Outer Heaven, and comes back home a hero. Huzzah. A few years later, there was a sequel where Snake needs to infiltrate basically Outer Heaven again and stop Big Boss again from activating Metal Gear again. Well, technically, later we find out that the first time he fought Big Boss, it wasn't the real Big Boss, but an army medic who was hypnotized and given plastic surgery to look like Big Boss. But that's a story for another day. And trust me, I've got a lot of things to say about that game. Like, what the fuck is happening here? Snake defeats the real Big Boss this time, and for now at least, he is officially dead and gone. Also, spoiler alert, it turns out that Big Boss was Snake's father.
Not true. That's impossible.
In fact, Snake is one of 3 clones of Big Boss that were created as part of a secret government experiment in an attempt to keep the legendary soldier's lineage going. Snake feels bad about committing patricide, but it had to be done to save the world. A few years later, it's time for the 3rd game in the series, Metal Gear Solid. Since the 2nd game, Snake has retired from Foxhound and is now living a solitary life in Alaska with only his snow dogs to keep him company.
When did you become a dog musher?
Right now, my 50 huskies are my only family. I've got to take care of them.
Wait, 50 dogs? How would you even feed that many dogs? That's too many dogs, bro. Anyways, Foxhound has since been swapped out with new members, and Liquid Snake, Solid Snake's twin brother, has led the group to revolt against the US government. They've taken over a military base on Shadow Moses Island in Alaska, where a new Metal Gear is being built. Years before the Shadow Moses incident, an army of Foxhound reserve soldiers were artificially enhanced with genetic material from Big Boss, as part of a super secret military project. The goal was for them to be big strong boys too, but after a while these soldiers started suffering from a mysterious illness. Most of them joined Liquid's revolt because one of Liquid's demands is that the US government hand over the remains of Big Boss, with the logic being that they could extract some sort of cure from the genome sickness from his genetic data. As the story progresses though, it becomes clear that Liquid doesn't really give a shit about the genome soldiers and is simply trying to one-up his father's legacy, which we'll get into later.
I am gonna get you better, and then I'm gonna beat you to death!
They also demand $1 billion because why not at that point? They threaten to use Metal Gear and launch a nuke if their demands aren't met. They remind me a lot of the Empire from Star Wars in that they never learn their lesson, like, how many times do you need to build a Death Star, guys? It isn't working out. So once again, Snake is tasked with sneaking into a military base and stopping a Metal Gear. But this time, he's doing it in the 3rd dimension. Before we go any further, I want to ask you a question. Yes, you emotionally vulnerable audience member. Do you like sick-ass, sweet-ass, hand-drawn pieces of art? Join my Patreon, and for $5 tiered members, I will draw you a picture of a Metal Gear Solid character and mail it to your house. Yes, your house, so you can frame it on your wall with all your other exquisite art pieces, such as the Mona Lisa or the girl with a pearl necklace. Don't quote me on that. Move over, beloved pictures of your fucking loved ones. Make room for Solid Snake and all of his adventures. Join my Patreon now using this link. Alright, back to the video. Let's talk about your support team, who you can talk via codec mostly whenever you want throughout the game. Roy Campbell is your stoic, experienced, older veteran character who you'll get most of your information from. He seems trustworthy. For now. Naomi Hunter is an expert on genes, and at the start of the game, she gives Snake an injection of nanomachines that will help him survive the extreme cold of Shadow Moses. This is our first introduction in the series to the concept of nanomachines, a topic that will be memed to death because nanomachines end up being a convenient answer for a lot of plot points. Why does this guy have vampire powers? Nanomachines. Why is Senator Mitch McConnell suddenly jacked as shit? Nanomachines. Mei Ling will save your game and offer little bits of wisdom too. She's adorable, but doesn't factor into the plot that much. Master Miller was actually first introduced in the last game, Metal Gear 2, as a drill instructor who helped train Snake. His character is majorly expanded on in the later games as Kazuhira Miller. He'll give you general survival advice.
Listen, Snake, there's a way to walk so your footsteps won't be heard. I call it stalking. Here's how you do it.
Natasha Romanenko is an expert on nuclear weapons. She probably factors the least into the overall plot of the game, but she will give you some real-world historical context behind nuclear weapons and their role in modern society. She doesn't appear in later games, but she does help ground the story in reality a bit and makes the story feel more comprehensive. Let me talk about all the stuff I really enjoy about this game before I get too critical of the little details. First, the sound design is amazing. The voice acting is top-notch, and the audio quality sounds surprisingly good, especially for being on a compressed disc.
I know you better than that. You'd take this assignment even without the threat.
Why do you say that?
You're a natural-born soldier. You're not the grow old gracefully type. It's the same for all of us who've seen real action. The only place we can feel truly alive is on the battlefield.
The graphics are pretty serviceable. I mean, everyone has blocky faces and no eyes, but it's a PS1 game, you've got to look past that. Like the nerdy girl who takes off her glasses and lets down her hair, and then you realize that this whole time, she was really award-winning actor Bill Paxton all along. Hey Bill Paxton, I loved you in Twister. Nice to meet you. And gameplay-wise, basically everything from Metal Gear 1 and 2 is done better here. Unlike Metal Gear 1, your codec buddies actually want to talk to you, maybe a little too much. In Metal Gear 1, Big Boss is basically like, have you beaten Metal Gear yet? No? Well, bye. Half the time you'd call Jennifer and she wouldn't even answer the phone. It'd be like her live-in boyfriend Greg, or whatever, telling you she's in the shower. This is kind of an important mission, Jennifer. Can you answer the damn phone? Other elements are redone better too, like using a Nikita to destroy the electric floor panels, trap holes in the floor, laser beam walls, and numbered keycard doors. Unfortunately, you still can't have a keycard and another item equipped at the same time, so if you're in a room full of poisonous gas, you need to take off your gas mask so you could open the door with a key, which is idiotic. The fun thing about the series is that there's dozens of ways to play it. You could kill everyone, or you can sneak around, and at the end of the game, you'll get a medal depending on how you beat it, like this hyena ranking, and I sure don't know what it means. Right from the beginning, this game is just dripping with charisma. It's got that riz, as the young folks like to say. YOLO... dab. I mean, the guards aren't just mindless NPCs. This dude is asleep on the job, which makes sense because it's freaking cold and in the middle of the night. Poor little guard, I just want to wrap him up in a little blanket. You could sneak into the base through the air vents like John McCain. McClane. There's a lot of sneaking in this game, of course, because Snake is more or less a realistic human being here, meaning he can't get shot a million times. He could get shot like twice before dying, so logically it makes more sense to just avoid fights altogether. You'll first try to rescue one of Foxhound's hostages, Donald Anderson, and he tells you some basics about Metal Gear, like that it's a nuclear walking tank. He drops dead suddenly from a heart attack.
What is it?
Wake me up and save me!
Not long after, Snake meets Meryl, Roy Campbell's niece, a genome soldier who refused to join Liquid's revolt. This will also be the player's introduction to Johnny Sasaki, a hapless guard that keeps shitting his pants. I actually covered Johnny's history a bit in my Metal Gear Iceberg video, which you should all go check out, by the way, link in the description. Needless to say, he's the best character in the franchise, and should definitely be played by Ryan Reynolds in a film adaptation, and I will die on that hill. Meryl leaves before you could get to know each other too well, but she does point you towards the next direction you need to go. You'll need to find the next hostage, Kenneth Baker, another old warmonger boomer who knows some stuff. Snake has to get to him by blowing up these walls with C4, which kind of plays out like the original Metal Gear, but it's a lot more grounded in reality this time, and not just him freaking Hulk smashing through the walls or twerking through the walls like She-Hulk. Baker is tied up with wires triggered to C4, so if you get too close, he'll blow. He's been tortured for information by Revolver Ocelot, one of the renegade Foxhound members. This leads to the first boss fight, and it'd be pretty easy if not for how terrible the gun aiming is in the game. Want to shoot diagonally or in basically any direction besides up, left, right, or down? Well, good fucking luck, loser. It's actually funny how easy Ocelot is to beat, considering how important he is to the series later on. It's probably because he chooses to use an ancient revolver as his weapon in the era of automatic assault rifles, simply because he thinks they look cool. What a doofus. I mean, penny farthings look cool, but if I tried taking one on the freeway, I'd freaking die. After the fight, a cyborg ninja appears out of nowhere and chops off Ocelot's hand, and then runs off. Which is probably not how Ocelot saw his day going.
Oh my god, I can't believe a ninja cut off my arm. That's the most preposterous thing I've ever seen, and I'm a Russian spy that acts like an American cowboy. Well, time to go looking for a new arm.
Why don't you just reattach your own hand? It's right there.
No, it's alright. I'll just get a new hand. This one's useless anyways. Time for an upgrade.
Why do you need an entire arm if just your hand got cut off?
Well, goodbye.
Afterwards, Kenneth Baker tells Snake a little more about Metal Gear and gives him a PAL key, one of 3 needed to stop Metal Gear from launching. Strangely, like Donald Anderson, he also dies suddenly from a heart attack. Snake calls the Colonel to tell him that something's up, and he claims that it's just a coincidence, but Naomi is acting mighty sus. Meryl calls Snake and suggests he get in contact with Hal Emmerich, the designer of Metal Gear, as he would be the one that knows how to stop it. So Snake makes his way over to the other side of the base like, gonna go give another dude a heart attack. On your way, you'll encounter this hallway full of deadly invisible lasers. My first fear about running into these was that I'd end up as a bunch of little meat cubes like in Resident Evil, but the reality is much worse. If you trigger the laser, the door's shut, and the room is filled with gas. You slowly die, and there's literally nothing you can do to stop it from happening. And you can't even talk to anyone on the codec one more time to say goodbye, or let the Colonel know to delete your search history. The solution here is to smoke a cigarette so you could use the smoke to see the laser. The characters make sure to emphasize that smoking is bad for you, but, it was still the solution for saving the world, so kind of a mixed message there. Nevertheless, this was one good example of Metal Gear Solid presenting its unique take on gameplay and puzzle solving. And while this sort of thing may not be too revolutionary now, it was pretty dang creative in 1998. The path to Dr. Emmerich is full of dangers, such as mines, a really frustrating tank fight, and electrified floors. The path outside Emmerich's office is littered with corpses, which, needless to say, is a little ominous. One neat detail is that one of the soldiers is actually still alive, which you could tell by turning on the thermal goggles. Sadly, he doesn't live for very long.
I will remember you.
Once you enter, you'll find that cyborg ninja from earlier confronting the Doctor. The Doctor pisses himself out of fear, beginning Kojima's storied history of characters pissing in his games. The cyborg ninja fight is tedious and annoying. Near the end, he'll teleport as you're punching him and attack you from behind, a move that isn't telegraphed at all and is absolutely bullshit. Snake defeats him, but the ninja runs off mysteriously as ninjas are wont to do. Snake meets Hal, a scientist who's super into anime and wanted to build giant fighting robots for a living. Snake hits him with the hard reality that his creation is going to kill a bunch of people, which was not what Hal was led to believe from his superiors. This doesn't come easy for Hal, as his father and grandfather were also both scientists who helped build WMDs, and he's now plagued with guilt for continuing their lineage. Ultimately, though, he decides to do the right thing and help Snake destroy his creation. He also mentions that he has an experimental freaking Harry Potter invisibility cloak, and so he isn't worried about being caught by the guards. At no point does he offer this to Snake, and neither does Snake think he needs it for this sneaking mission. Snake follows Meryl into the woman's bathroom, like Maverick in Top Gun. And like Maverick in Top Gun, it's a little rapey and hasn't aged super well.
How did you recognize me in disguise?
You got a great butt.
Butt?
Butt.
But.
You got a great butt.
But.
You got a great butt. But.
Meryl is headstrong and a little cocky. She looks up to Snake, who seems like an action movie hero, especially after taking down 2 Metal Gears in the previous game, but he rejects it, telling her that there's nothing glamorous about war. It's just a dirty, ugly business. Meryl had always wanted to be a soldier, but after killing for the first time, she's having second thoughts about her life decisions. They'll talk, and this will lead to an official team-up. This would be the greatest team-up ever, only later being surpassed by Mark Wahlberg and Denzel Washington in 2 guns. Thought 1 gun was enough? Think again, it's 2 guns. There's 2 guns now. They make their way into the next room when Meryl starts acting funny, which is weird because she's a woman. I'm kidding. Please don't at me. It doesn't take long for Snake to realize she's been possessed by Foxhound member Psycho Mantis. This fight is chock full of cool little details, like if you go into first-person view, you see from Meryl's eyes and not Snake's. Mantis keeps tricking you into thinking the channel was changed on the TV with a cheeky little Hideo video pun. He also reads the content of your memory card to you, which is like him reading your mind.
Oh, I see you've been playing... Oh my god. My little brother sometimes likes to play his games on my console. Sure. I'm serious, really. So, you like feet stuff, huh? What? No! Hey, I'm not judging or anything. I've never seen that game before in my life. Alright. It was on your memory card, so...
The only way to beat Psycho Mantis here is to plug the controller into the second port so that he can't read your mind anymore. This was a pretty unique touch of creativity back in the day. Mantis is defeated, and his dying wish is for you to put his mask back on because the thoughts of others are constantly bombarding his mind, and he just wants to be alone in his own world with his own thoughts for a while. You know, I had Mantis all wrong. At first I thought he was just some creepy psychic serial killer, but now I realize he's just a dude in his 30s that wants people to shut up so he could relax for a minute, and I respect that. Snake and Meryl press on through wolf-infested territory. This area sucks, and everyone hates it. If you know someone who says that they like the wolf cave part, then they're a liar, and you shouldn't be friends with liars. They proceed past the caves, and just when you think things are looking up, Meryl is shot like 1,000 times. Meryl! This eventually leads to a boss fight that is either really easy or really hard depending on where you're positioned, and if you've overdosed on prescription drugs. Easy there, Heath Ledger. Snake tries to proceed, but is promptly apprehended and brought to a torture room and or a sex dungeon, which, I mean, why would that already be installed at a nuclear waste facility? That'd be like if they just had, like, a random-ass indoor swimming pool. Who is this for? Okay, so this property, I think you're really gonna like. No gas rooms. The mortgage will be a little higher, but that's the trade-off. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. 1 bedroom does have a giant torture device built in that takes up like 70% of the room. Don't you have any normal houses you could show us? Look, you didn't want the gas house room. You didn't want the place with the trap holes in the floor that dropped you into an eternal abyss. Your budget is $300,000, all right? You're not gonna get your dream house. Not in this economy. During the interrogation, you'll get to meet the main antagonist, Liquid Snake, for the first time. Liquid is like Jacob from Twilight in that he insists on being completely shirtless the entire game because he wants to show off his ripper bod. It made sense enough for Jacob because he's like warm-blooded as a werewolf or whatever, but come on, Liquid, you're in Alaska. We haven't really talked much about Liquid's motivations here, so let's do that now. Solid and Liquid, as I mentioned earlier, are clone sons of Big Boss. Liquid has always had issues with his identity, being a clone and all. On top of that, he was told he inherited the recessive genes from his father, while Solid Snake got those juicy-ass dominant genes. So Liquid basically grows up with this massive inferiority complex, and feels like he's destined to play second fiddle.
Like a damn fiddle!
There's a lot of issues with the Phantom Pain storyline, but one thing they got right was young Liquid's development. He's basically doing his own thing in Africa, and Big Boss comes to shut down his party and dismantle his militia. From Liquid's perspective, that would have been pretty infantilizing, especially coming from a dad who hasn't been there his entire life. But to then later find out that that wasn't even his dad, but just some lookalike his real dad sent because he couldn't be bothered, well, you might start to understand why Liquid begins feeling like he needs to prove himself by one-upping his father. So Liquid isn't just going to build a new outer heaven, like Big Boss did, but he'll also make a genome army where Big Boss is less special because now everyone has his genes. Another motivator is his desire for constant war, same as his father. Liquid was born a child soldier, and he wants to continue being a soldier even in peaceful times. When Venom Snake took him back to Mother Base in the Phantom Pain, he thought he was doing what was best for the boy, and he probably was, but to Liquid, he was having that part of his identity taken away from him. And since then, he's always wanted to get that part back. He wants to be Mr. Badass Bitch sitting on his throne in Africa with loyal soldiers at his disposal. He wants to prove he's the best. Anyways, Snake has one of the PAL keys, and Ocelot asks where the other two are. It seems at this point like they simply want the keys to prevent Snake from stopping Metal Gear from launching, but the real motive becomes more clear later on. Snake tells him he doesn't know about the other keys, but the bad guys don't believe him.
Say, Ocelot, can you handle torturing Snake by yourself, or do you need a hand? Someday I'll take your entire arm, Liquid.
What was that?
Oh, nothing. Let's begin the torture.
Ocelot begins zapping Snake like freaking Emperor Palpatine, and if you don't mash the A button fast enough, you'll get a game over. Speaking of which, if you're new here, how about you go to my channel and mash that subscribe button as fast as you can. Great segue, Wes. You might be tempted to skip the torture altogether by pressing the submit button, like a little bitch, but if you do, it'll come at a pretty harsh price at the end of the game, but we'll get into that later. After surviving the torture, you're brought to a jail cell where your guard is Johnny Sasaki again. Eventually, he'll shit his pants and run off to the bathroom. You could hide under the bed and attack him once he enters the cell to look for you, or you can have Otacon come and give you some ketchup so you can do the cliche injured prisoner trick, or if you wait long enough, the cyborg ninja will break you out and kill Johnny Sasaki. Weirdly, there is no time paradox game over for this one.
Snake, what have you done? You changed the future. You've created a time paradox.
Also inside the jail cell is the rotten, smelly corpse of Donald Anderson. This is because the Donald Anderson you spoke to earlier was actually Decoy Octopus in disguise, trying to figure out if you knew how to use the PAL keys. This, by the way, is when we start to piece together that the antagonists don't really know what they're doing, and they're just sort of improvising their plan. On your way to Metal Gear's hangar bay, you'll have to go up the endless stairs from Mario 64. You'll face off against Liquid in a flying attack helicopter.
Get to the chopper!
And you'll be thrown into a surprise Captain America elevator fight. Snake has a rematch with Sniper Wolf and finishes her off for good this time. She lays there dying, but like Psycho Mantis, still has time to tell her entire life story. Otacon has made it very apparent by this point in the story that he's madly in love with her, and he sits on the sideline crying about her fate. It's really awkward because the way Otacon had described her up till now makes it seem like they had some sort of romantic relationship, or at least a cordial one, but that is not the case at all.
I loved you.
Quiet! Don't get in our way.
Not long after this, you'll face off with the final Foxhound member, Vulcan Raven. He's a big Native American fella who also refuses to dress appropriately for the weather. He has a big gun, and it leads to a pretty challenging fight. Vulcan loves his ravens, and if you shoot any of the ravens before the fight, he'll get super mad. He's like, "You can't shoot my birds, these are my birds. Stop being so mean to my birds."
And then those crows spread the word to even more crows. They were like, that's the man who bullied Jonathan.
Snake finally arrives at Metal Gear and tries to stop it by using the PAL key to deactivate it. But of course, it can't just be that simple. Turns out there were never 3 keys, just one key that works differently depending on the temperature. He needs to cool the key and then heat up the key. And then also at some point a rat eats the key and you need to go and find it and shoot it and dig through its dead rat body to get the key back. So it's just an hour of backtracking back and forth to pad the game's runtime, basically, and it is the worst part of the game by far. Finally, all the PAL keys are used, and that's when Liquid Snake reveals that you've been an unwitting tool to their end. PAL keys didn't deactivate Metal Gear. They did, the opposite of that. Shit. When you couldn't feel any more stupid, that's when you get hit with another truth bomb. Within the nanomachine shot that Dr. Naomi gave you at the start of the mission is a thing called Foxdie. Foxdie is an artificially created virus that targets specific individuals and kills them, simulating a heart attack. Naomi injected Snake with it with the hope that simply being face-to-face with the Foxhound team would kill them. It's also around this time that the game does another big dramatic reveal. Master Miller, you remember him, right? He'd give Snake survival advice like, "You should always wait 30 minutes after eating before going for a swim. You should floss twice a day for healthier gums. When disposing of a prostitute," that Miller, apparently, wasn't Miller at all. The Miller from the Big Boss era, the one who was played like a damn fiddle, was killed unceremoniously in his home shortly before the mission began. Liquid has been impersonating him this entire time. This Shyamalanian twist really blew my mind when I first played the game, and it actually holds up to scrutiny pretty well. Anytime Liquid was busy, like when you were about to fight him in the Hind D, for example, Miller suspiciously wouldn't answer his codec. I knew you were up to something, you sneaky, sneaky boy. Now that Snake has been tricked into activating Metal Gear, he has no choice but to fight it on foot, which is understandably difficult. I probably retried this fight like a dozen times. Snake is about to get squished, but is saved by that cyborg ninja from earlier. He's actually Frank Yeager, a soldier Snake saved and then later killed in the first 2 games. He was brought back to life by the government and turned into a cyborg killing machine, hell-bent on fighting Snake to the death because he wants a warrior's death. Rather than fighting you, he instead stops Metal Gear and saves Snake's life. Afterwards, Liquid insists on fighting Snake mano a mano, which is supposed to come off as this noble warrior sort of thing, but rings a little hollow after he tried killing Snake with a helicopter and then a giant walking tank. Also, for some reason, Snake is also shirtless for this fight too. This whole fight reminded me of the end scene from Roadhouse, where the bad guy is like, "I used to fuck guys like you in prison," and you're like, wait, is that supposed to be a threat or a pickup line? And then Snake rips out Liquid's throat with his bare hands. Afterwards, Snake discovers Meryl nearby. Remember when I said earlier that if you submitted during the torture, like a little bitch, something bad would happen? Well, if you took the little bitch route, you'll discover that Meryl had died at some point from her injuries. This led to a very tear-jerking scene with Snake questioning his purpose in life and Otacon trying to cheer him up with a pep talk.
People die, but death is not defeat. That's what Hemingway said. I lost Wolf, too.
Quiet! Don't get in our way.
I actually prefer this ending, though with the reveal in Metal Gear Solid 4 that Meryl is still very much alive, this is considered non-canon. On the other hand, if you handled the torture like a big boy, you'll find that Meryl magically survived. Personally, I find that the canon ending undercuts some of the themes of the story, namely that war is ugly and innocent people die, but I get why the ending was scrapped. Audiences generally like seeing the hero with the girl in the end. Too bad they did their relationship dirty in Metal Gear Solid 4. Ew, you're old now? I'm gonna go marry Johnny. There's one final epic chase scene with Meryl driving a car and Snake shooting down a pursuing Liquid, who is also magically still alive. It's clear this game was heavily inspired by 80s and 90s action films, and this scene is unapologetically just the ending of Die Hard. Liquid drops dead, and the camera pans over to show Otacon with a smoking gun. No, that would have been better. Instead, Liquid conveniently drops dead from... With Metal Gear destroyed and the threat of nuclear war nullified, for now at least, Snake and Meryl get on a nearby snowmobile and ride off into the sunset. The credits roll with very compressed AVI videos of Alaska and dog sledding, and all is well. Hideo Kojima has said in the past that there's a single word that he'd use to define each game. In the first 3 Metal Gear Solid games, it's gene, meme, and scene. Genes play a literal role in the story, as the US government at some point in the past took genes from Big Boss and used them to create super soldiers. Liquid is after Big Boss's genetic material, and Naomi injects nanomachines into Snake that alter his genes, etc., etc. But the theme of genes goes much deeper than that, as the concepts of inheritance, free will, and destiny are all very much present in the story. Snake is a literal clone of Big Boss, and because he's a highly competent super soldier, you'd think at face value he'll have the same personality and make the same life choices. But in reality, who Snake chooses to be couldn't be any further from that. While Big Boss was a jaded husk of a man who abandoned his friends and sought out conflict, Solid Snake simply wants peace, and routinely shows compassion towards others. Snake very much chooses throughout the series to not let his genes define him. Genes, in a way, are how we expect people to be, and most of what we see in this game isn't what it first appears to be. Ocelot, a former KGB agent, is working within the US government. Certain characters will actually be Foxhound member Decoy Octopus in disguise. People you think will be your enemies will actually be your friends, and people you think are your friends turn out to be your enemies. Appearances, like genes, can be deceiving. Conversely, other characters like Liquid Snake fall in line with the traits and behaviors they're genetically disposed to. Liquid lets his genes define him, and as a result, ends up making the same mistakes Big Boss did. The sins of the father is another major theme in the series, but maybe we'll explore that in a different video. Metal Gear Solid has always been praised for its story and complex themes, and I can understand why. While some elements of the gameplay haven't aged well, the story concepts and presentation definitely have. Sure, Mr. Johnny Farty Fart Diarrhea is funny, and "Can love bloom on the battlefield" is a hammy line that probably could have been delivered better by Hayden Christensen.
I don't like sand.
But beyond the tongue-in-cheek kitsch is some real depth. All the double crosses and schemes of the antagonists ultimately brought their own ruin. Meanwhile, Snake, Otacon, and Meryl, the characters who kept choosing to do the right thing despite the danger, well, they came out on top. Going back to the topic of genes, they all chose to become something more than their genes. Meryl came from a military background and wanted to be a soldier, but after seeing real battles, she became humbled and started to rethink her life. Otacon came from a lineage of scientists who kept creating weapons of mass destruction. He chose to break the lineage of his family and destroy his creation. And Snake, who didn't want to be a killer anymore like his father was, instead found that he could use his skills and abilities to save lives. What I'm saying is, Metal Gear Solid has a great story with satisfying characters with legitimate character arcs that pay off, and that's a rare thing to see, especially in video games. Is the gameplay perfect? No. I mean, after Snake Eater gave us the third-person camera angle, it's really hard going back to the over-the-top angle. I really hate running towards the bottom of the screen and literally not being able to see 5 feet in front of me. This is supposed to be a stealth game. I can't even see what Snake sees. This is a problem. But, you know, everything else about the game makes this forgivable, so 9 out of 10. Within a few years, a sequel would be made, bringing Metal Gear into the PS2 era, and not long after, a third sequel would be made, and that one is arguably one of the greatest games ever made. So if you guys like this video, let me know in the comments, because I'd love to keep this party going and make retrospectives for the whole trilogy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.
Yes, sir. The mission was a success. No, sir. My cover is intact. They never discovered that I, Revolver Ocelot, was really a double, triple, quadruple stuffed agent all along. No, sir. I don't think I'm speaking in a weirdly expository way. Yes, sir, I agree completely. Everyone should subscribe to wesdoesgames. No, sir. No one suspected you were, in fact, the third Big Boss clone. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President.
because it's 2005.